Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So this particular topic is going to get a little bit of a thicket. So Trump administration ousts UN official to protect Israel from criticism. Like I said, this is going to be somewhat of a thicket. I'm going to try to avoid things that some people get in trouble with, like making philosophical points in a political conversation. I've heard Sam Harris, he would say certain things. And I think I understood why there was the misunderstanding. He's essentially making philosophical points, but he's having a talk in regards to politics. Those things have a difficult time. The things that the way a person talks in regards to talking about politics is somewhat different in regards to real world scenarios versus philosophical talking points. Not everybody's going to understand the difference in those things, and when they don't, you're going to end up with Sam Harris on Cenk Uygur for 3 hours, both of them bumping heads. So I'm going to try to cut this in a particular way and be as clear as I possibly can for each of these things. And look, right off the bat, my bias is towards people. And so I am primed, in some degree, to be against Israel because I full well believe that, look, this particular report is right, but there's more context we need to talk about. A UN agency published a report noting that Israel has established an apartheid regime that dominates the Palestinian people as a whole. Yesterday, the author of the report, who served as an executive secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia since 2010, Rima Khalif, resigned after the Trump administration, working in conjunction with Israel, pressured the UN Secretary General to demand that she withdraw the report. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. It's amazing for a few reasons. The UN Security Council, for the most part, has as their basis, most of those countries full well understand that what's going on over there is illegal by international law. So it's a little bit weird for them to come out with a report that confirms the fact that what they're doing is against international law. And then to succumb to pressure to leave because of it, that's amazing. Khalif, a Jordanian national who has served in multiple high government positions, refused the demand to repudiate her own report, instead choosing to resign. The report, which was co-authored by Jewish-American Princeton professor and former UN official Richard Falk, a longtime critic of the Israeli occupation, has now been removed from the UNESCO website. What makes this most remarkable is how unremarkable the report's conclusion is. It's a point that a former Israeli prime minister, as well as Trump's own defense secretary, has made unequivocally. Back in 2010, Ehud Barak, Israel's former prime minister and its most decorated soldier, explicitly warned that Israel was on path to what he called a permanent apartheid state. As he put it, as long as this territory west of Jordan River, there is only one political entity called Israel, it is going to either be non-Jewish or non-democratic. If this block of millions of Palestinians can't vote, that will be an apartheid state. And that is true. Now, understand, I need to parse this a little bit. Making a statement of reality. It's not necessarily making a condemnation. Those things are different. Meaning, if I say some of the Muslims in those countries treat their women horrible, that's not me taking a shot at Islam. That's me making a determination based on objective reality, based on my own values. I think people should be equal. I don't create these distinctions that are created by the fantasy of a particular religion. I don't care what that religion is. Does that put me in a position to bash Muslims or Islam? No. Does that mean for something specific that I identify that I don't particularly like? Yeah, I can identify that particular thing without necessarily tarnishing the entire whole. I'm making this point that being objective and looking at a situation and say, this, and this, these people are in a particular place that are under military rules, like an open-air ghetto of sorts. That's something you can see. That's something you can objectively identify. Are you telling me that even if you're against this idea that this report is accurate, that you can't see any perspective, any legitimate perspective that makes this case that is legitimate, that the person is not being wrong or unfair or biased or anything else. They're making a case that says, look, this looks like an apartheid state to me. Are you telling me you can't see that argument? Because I have a hard time believing you if you're saying, yeah, I can see no argument that makes that case. Now look, and we need to give this more context, because leaving it at that doesn't necessarily give a total view. I don't think it does. Let's start at a different angle. So there's this societal belief, to some degree, that suffering builds character. It's like this particular person was hurt, and this particular person probably grew in that experience. That's not really reality, though. You can grow from an experience. You can incorporate that experience into who you are. You can grow past it. But oftentimes, people that hurt turn around and hurt other people. It's not, they don't treat dogs that they're trying to get to fight nice and gentle. They treat them like animals. They treat them in a way that can get those people or get those dogs to fight a particular way. They're rearing it. People are a product of their environment. Now, there's an interplay between who that person is and how that person is, but ultimately the society itself creates how that person turns out. Meaning the experiences, the things that that particular person encountered, the things that that particular society encountered, does indicate, or does at the very least push in a particular direction of behavior. I'm making this case that says how people behave is not completely distinct and separate unto itself. The society plays a role. Now, I'm not saying society plays a role as a cut one way or the other. Most of it is flat fact. It's just the way it is. Your ideals in an American are a particular way. Now, some of these things are illusions, but ultimately, if you went to another country, they would clearly be able to identify the fact that you were an American. And vice versa, for people coming here. The point I'm getting at is, we need to acknowledge, and when I mean acknowledge, I don't necessarily mean condone or browbeat. Just acknowledge. It's just an objective view of reality. This particular thing takes place. This particular thing is happening in a particular reality. We have to acknowledge that how Israel got started and what happened to those people to get them in that particular way. And not just that, the cultural relevance of it, or maybe, the cultural momentum of it. Meaning that you can acknowledge that they went through an ordeal. That's true. That's completely true. We can also acknowledge that going through something like that would create a cultural memory in the people who went through it, whether it's come from their family line or not, whether they themselves were involved in it. It doesn't matter. There's a cultural memory associated with that stuff. So we can understand it in two ways. One of, we're not letting this take place again. Full stop. But in the second point, of being in pursuant to, we're not letting this take place again, to feel a little animated and making sure that doesn't take place again. Meaning, their view of reality may or may not be true, but at the very least you can see the perspective of where they're coming from in making that view of reality, their appraisal. Their appraisal of reality can't be the end-all be-all, but at the very least it helps you see where they're coming from. This entire thing started because of Britain. I mean, this Balfour document, Britain was promising a bunch of stuff because they were getting their ass handed to them in that war. I think it was World War II. They were promising stuff to everybody. Ultimately, their biggest thing was, we need allies, we need allies, we need to do what we need to do to keep preserve Britain. So it created somewhat of a conflict involving land and territory. Fair enough. Shit happens. Is what it is. The point I'm making is, you can see a situation of Israelis looking at a situation saying, we are in hostile territory. And based upon the events that happened to us before, that is not happening again. It is a cultural memory of sorts that can push people to behave a particular way. And again, that doesn't necessarily excuse the behavior. It tries to explain it, in a sense. Just trying to kind of document where these people are coming from when they're taking certain actions. Because from my perspective, the things that they're doing is absolutely ghastly. It's absolutely ghastly. But I do need to understand why they're doing them. Because I can't necessarily believe that, okay, those people were just hateful. I've been to Israel. I've been to parts of Palestine. And over and over again, I would find myself in this conversation or trying to avoid a conversation about this calamity, all the stuff that goes on. And over again, I was never able to extricate myself from the conversation, because ultimately there are elements of it where I agree with Israel, and there are elements of it where I agree with the people they're oppressing. That is a thicket. That is not necessarily the easiest thing in order to be in. So understand my position on this, because I kind of do want to talk it through. You have a situation where you have a government. This particular government, for the most part, is a nuclear powered nation. This particular government is backed by the United States, meaning they get billions of dollars to enshrine their advantage. There's another civilization that's living there. The stronger civilization has made the decision that they're okay with taking land and material and resources from this other civilization. It is against the law. It's completely against the law. But for whatever reason, you have a right-wing government. And make a distinction between the government and the people themselves. There is a distinction. A right-wing government that made the choice that says, you know what, it is fair game. We won. It's our territory. We're going to take this territory, and we're going to take whatever we want from this particular spot. Israel is no different than any other government. Meaning, the pressures of the public itself, the needs of that particular government, in many cases can drive how that government behaves, whether or not the people in that particular government wants to behave that way or not. But the government is also going to put out propaganda in order to justify what it's doing. Every government does it. Meaning, even in the civil rights movement, the United States put out particular propaganda just from a societal standpoint that castigated one element of that particular society as inferior to another. They weren't doing it because they were necessarily hateful people. They were doing it because they were trying to keep the status quo intact. And making this point that there are certain incentives for Israel to maintain this line of, two-state, all the while they take that particular territory. Now, let's flip that to the other side. Anytime you're oppressing a particular people, certainly there's going to be consequences for the things that you're doing. I made this point before. If you're going to be a monster, or if you're going to try to turn somebody into subhuman, you yourself are becoming a monster to do it. That person has worth. That person is a person. If you're going to turn that person into something else, you yourself are also turning yourself into something else. I'm making this point. They're inseparable. You can't necessarily get away from that. What do you think the pressures are going to be in that particular society if you think you're being unfairly treated? Dispossessed of land. Incapable of voting, essentially being in an open-air ghetto. And not just an open-air ghetto, one in which one of the larger powers in the world gives a blank check to behave in any particular fashion, meaning they have no power in that situation. The government with the nuclear weapons that gets billions of dollars from our particular government, that they do have power. They have military force of will. So when they kill 2,000 people, 80% of which are civilians, and yet they're continuously calling it a war, that's a little weird to me. That's a little weird. That's my point. There's a bias in the way this stuff gets covered, particularly in this country. I've had conversations with Israelis, Israeli soldiers for that matter, who, once they get past that thing of, this guy isn't just trying to castigate me, can have an honest conversation of saying, okay, fair enough, I can see how some of the stuff that we do looks bad, even though we have reasons for doing it. That's an honest conversation. Now, you can have this thing on whether or not they should do it or not. That's a different question. But you need to at least see where the perspectives are coming from. And understand, this is still a quagmire. It's not a situation where Israel can say, all right, we were wrong, we're opening the borders. You have a lot of pissed off people because of the behaviors that you guys have taken. You still have to ensure that this country remains stable. Not necessarily because they have some God-given right to exist. That's not what it is. If you want them to go along with any particular plan that ensures that, A, they're secure, they're not going to go with any particular plan at all, any deal that they think makes them any less secure. The problem is, because of everything that took place, you gotta cut this shit out. Meaning you have to be fair in regards to how you unravel this thing, but you can't unravel it in a way that allows Israel to take a hit. Because Israel is not going to go for a situation where Israel takes a hit. This is my point, it's a thicket. Those particular things have already taken place. The feelings have already been set in by the people who've been abused, put in prison, killed, however you want to put it. Whether you think those things are illusions or not, whether you think Israel is justified or not, you have to at the very least acknowledge the perspective of the people who are there, who are in that open air ghetto, who are experiencing those things. Because ultimately, you're not going to get any peace until that's worked out. That's your thicket. Those people are already upset at this point, meaning you got to ensure Israel is safe. How do you ensure Israel is safe and at the same time unravel the shit that has been going on for the past X number of years and that the United States, for the most part, gave a blank check to? That's the question. That's the question. It's not about castigating. It's about looking at reality in an objective way and saying, okay, these are the things that took place in this reality. These are the factors that are weighing on each other. I'm not trying to browbeat. I'm not trying to necessarily hit anybody in the head. I am trying to point out and say, okay, this is what's taking place. And these are the effects of what's taking place. Whether I like the effects of what's taking place or not is irrelevant to me. I want to understand what are the factors that are making this particular thing function the way this thing is functioning. And how do you unravel it? I have no clue how to unravel it. You have a right-wing government that's incentivized not to look for a peaceful solution. How are you going to get somebody to make a solution when their political survival of sorts depend on them not making that solution? Part of this issue is the Israeli government itself. So any honest conversation about it has to involve that government. You can make this case that says, well, we need to ensure the safety of Israel. That's fine. But you at the very least need to acknowledge what they're doing in that particular government that's creating that much hostility in the people that's around it. Why is the UN continuing to try to put resolutions? Why is the rest of the world looks at the situation different than the United States? Do you think the rest of the world is crazy, or do you think the rest of the world looks at this and says, it looks like they're stealing people's land? It looks like they have a military occupation of somebody else's land, and they're taking people's land. If you can't have that honest conversation, then it doesn't matter what you said, because you're living in a reality, an illusion of sorts. We can have this talk on how do you keep Israel safe while we're trying to unravel this. But any conversation you have has to deal with a level of integrity and fairness. You at least have to come up with this idea of saying, all right, those people want to live their life free of military occupation. If you're not starting there, where are you starting? Where are you starting? And you have to come to this honest recollection that the conversations that we have in this country on this topic are heavily favored in one way. I've been outside this country. I've seen the conversations that people have outside this country versus inside this country. They're drastically different. They're drastically different. And when I had the conversation with that particular soldier, and look, Israel is a beautiful country. I am making a distinction between the government and the people. There is a difference between those things. There was this, I was in a store. This woman didn't know me from anybody. And I was telling her, I was having a conversation with her. It was an older woman. She was like, she says, where are you on your way to? I said, well, I'm leaving here and I'm going to go to Nepal. She was like, oh my God, don't go to Nepal. Don't go to Nepal. I had a family there and that guy got sick. And this woman is putting her heart out for some stranger that she didn't know. She's a person. Do you believe that the incentives that that person runs through are somehow different than incentives? Like, if you were raised in Nazi Germany, how do you think you behave? You can't necessarily browbeat the individuals within a particular society. Some of this stuff is boiled down to the factors to which they're born into. Yes, they need to unravel those factors, but these are factors that they were born into. The ideas, the cultural ideas that are set in the behavior, and not just the cultural ideas, the effects of those things, meaning how those things affect other people, whether they were well-meaning, whether they were being earnest, is irrelevant. If it's affecting people in a way where those people feel they're being taken advantage of, those people are going to have some feelings about being taken advantage of. So, it doesn't matter if Donald Trump tries to force this person to not come out with a report. That doesn't get rid of the truth of the situation. It doesn't change the truth of the situation. What is your goal? Is your goal to unravel this and to make this work? Fine. Then, if you want to make this work, you're going to have to start on some level of fairness and acknowledging the perspectives of the people who are involved in that particular situation. Both sides. Both sides. These guys want to be safe. These guys want to be free. How do we make this shit work? That's your conversation. Trying to browbeat people into not having an honest conversation. Because look, there is something to be said about safety. I mean, when I went into Israel, I think there was like, there had just been like an explosion or something that took place. And beyond there just being an explosion, I was on the bus with this woman who was Belgian Palestinian. She was ferocious. I absolutely loved her. And we were walking through Palestine. She was like, borders should be open. Everything should be open. I was like, well, but how are you going to ensure the safety of the people of those borders that you're trying to open? Like, you can't be so naive to say, well, the moment that the borders are open, that everybody's kumbaya. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I told you, I believe it's a open-air ghetto. I do not believe that just opening the doors or opening the gates or whatever, everybody's going to be this kumbaya moment. Do not have this belief at all that suffering makes beautiful people. I think it's the opposite. I think when people are put through rough situations, those people may internalize those things and at some point may get over it. But let's not pretend that the person who comes out of that rough situation is the most beautiful person on the planet. There are pressures, there are things that are acting against them that are keeping them from being self-actualized. They do not have their needs met. Those people act a particular way. That's not castigating the group. That's acknowledging the situation that they're in. Any fix has to take both of those perspectives into account. And look, I'm making this point in the sense of when I was walking through Palestine, I heard somebody cursing, like literally, foaming at the mouth cursing. And they're cursing in English. And I was stuffing my mouth. I was eating corn or something. Somebody gave me a thing. She had just explained to the guy, she was like, why is this guy having earrings on? And they were like, she was like, oh, he's an American. I was like, oh, okay, he's American. I hear somebody cursing extremely loud. I turn around and there's this guy sitting somewhere mad that she's not necessarily wearing a hairnet or a scarf or something. She rips over and attacks the guy. Scares the shit out of the guy. I'm making this point that there is a difference in culture. That identifying that, saying that, is not browbeating, or it's not taking a stance on one or the other. It's just noticing that there is a difference in the things that both sides prize on this. If you have a particular culture that's a religious culture, there are going to be certain idiosyncrasies associated with it. That's not a castigation. That's an accurate description of reality. And same token, if you have a situation where you have a state that's suppressing another state, of course that state is going to be pissed. They're being taken advantage of. And so, yeah, that's going to create anger. That's going to create hostility. Any unraveling has to take that hostility and anger into account. It's just good damn sense. I'm sick of this hamster wheel with this particular issue. It's like, solve it. Part of my annoyance with it is that I do believe that he's incentivized not to solve it. Meaning Benjamin Netanyahu, for the most part, in that right-wing government, has an incentive not to solve this issue. Meaning this issue just continues to go on and on and on. It is an apartheid state. It should be addressed as such. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't work towards a solution. It just means you need to acknowledge reality. And I make the case that any solution, any honest, real, earnest solution starts with an acknowledgement of reality first. So, that's my take. I try to stay away from this particular issue, but this is not a channel for pussies. We can have a conversation about this stuff. Hey, if you like the content, like, share, all that good stuff. Thanks, guys.